Now, I dialed 911 a long time ago.
Oh,
Kerry, welcome
dear.
back to the Backpack Show. How was it when you were,
Thank you.
you know, upside down?
It was a little weird because most of the people I know were obviously awake when I was asleep, and vice versa. So I
Oh,
spent a couple of weeks like it was. You spend a lot more introspective time because there's nobody talking to you or even trying. And work did not talk to me at all. It was like totally unplugged.
very
And it
nice.
was, yeah, it was very interesting. I dragged my kid to every like historic anything in Brisbane and then in Sydney. So I had
Wow.
to pace it though. I had to pace it though. Like a kid can get through like 1 to 3 things and then they're pretty done. And I brought them for tea every place because I like to get tea, like high tea,
Oh,
different
hi, T.
places.
Also,
Yes,
hi,
because
Nikki.
it's a little bit different every place you go. But
Look
I'm
at you.
excited to be back. So I'm back because we have a horror author today.
I know if there's a horror out there, that means Kerry did it.
I know. Well, so I was what happened was I started reading some indie horror and followed the author on Twitter, and they have this like really vibrant independent horror author community, and they support each other's work and they're always talking about each other. I think I started with Julie Hutchings and then the dominoes all fell like as I found Wabgishig Rice and V Castro, and I've been like on from there. So our friend Keith on Twitter said, have you read Emma J. Gibbon's book, Dark Blood Comes from the Feet? I didn't sleep for like a week. And I was like, oh, I got to read this. So I just downloaded the audiobook, started listening to it, did not realize it was a compilation of short stories, and was very confused until I
So,
figured it out. But very, very good. Each one, just a little slice of really scary, a totally different universe. Loved it. Really stuck with me.
so horror author Emma J. Gibbon,
And poet and librarian.
pardon me, poet slash librarian. I was a library page.
Correct.
It was my first ever job. We'll talk about that.
Yay.
So, hey, and a new intro from Dan.
Ha ha. Ha ha.
This intro doesn't even. Backpack Show.
Push buttons or don't. If you can't push ads, you can't push intro.
I thought intro was my button. That's because
They're all your buttons,
I can
including
cut
the
you off
ads.
magically anytime I want.
I know, and frequently do. So, oh, by the way,
Sweet.
your parents are here.
I'm not
Oh,
supposed to
hello.
push comments, but I didn't know that Emma's Keith's librarian. Who knew?
Oh, hi, Leslie.
Hi, Leslie.
Nikki.
Leslie had a whole week away from the old office,
Chloe.
so she
Hey,
should
me
be
too.
grateful.
Nikki says upside down.
Hey,
I was
Nikki.
in the upside down. In the upside down.
Buenos
Hey,
dias,
coach.
coach.
And of course,
My biological father, Steve Brogan, and his wife, Diane Brogan.
also known as your mother.
She might have given
So,
birth to me.
you want to push the ads or you want me to? Fussy.
Oh, there are
I'm,
ads? Who
there
did
are.
this sort of thing? Look at this.
I don't
There
know.
are new ads because my lazy ass wasn't making them. So, hey, you want to make a show like this and interview your own author? Use this bent up duck. You can make your own show.
What?
Look at him. He looks
He's
bent.
looking at the make a show thing.
He has scoliosis.
Oh, shut up.
The duck has spine
Don't
problems.
body shame him or her. I don't, how can you tell with a
That's a
duck?
fella. That's a fella.
Okay. I
Because
don't know.
in nature, the guy is prettier because they have to try to attract the woman.
You mean in nature?
In nature,
In the animal kingdom?
right? Get a show. Get your own damn show. cbrogan.net/streamer. You can get one. Hey, want a podcast? You can get
Hey.
one. Emma's been on some podcasts.
Yes.
You could get one at castos.com. They're a great host. Also good for horror people. You know
Easy
why?
to use.
It's spooky.
Easy to use.
It's spooky
So
technology.
spooky.
Wouldn't lie. Hey, you want a .online domain? You can get one in this room probably. cbrogan.net/online. Use the code Chris. Doesn't matter how you spell it.
No, all caps. It has to be all caps. I don't
Uh,
know why.
I don't know why,
I
but
don't
you
know.
could, and you can get the show. Hey, want to search for Emma? Do it. Go to presearch.com, put in Emma J. Gibbon, and see where you end up. This isn't Google. Stick it to the man. You don't have to have Google anymore. F that stuff. There we go.
You mentioned Google twice while we do the ad for their
For
competitor.
pre-search, yeah. Google.
Yeah. Pre-search. So let's get Emma. I'm so excited.
Yeah, let's bring it. Hey, Emma, welcome to the show.
Hello.
Oh, look who it
Um,
is.
that
Cody
duck
says the duck is
is
sassy.
more colorful, like
Yeah.
you.
Nikki says the ducks are more
your hair.
colorful. And Bob Cargill says, good morning. Hello.
Speaking of which, dark blood comes from the feet. That sounds a little more factual than a horror author normally starts with. Was that a good lead in? Because you're like, what does that mean? Or like, why is that the title?
So the title is it's a quote in one of the stories, and it's from the story. It's from Celador, and it's actually I think it's the Celador's a story about a couple who are live in a haunted house, and one of the characters goes for Reiki, and the Reiki person says it to her. And her partner, her wife, makes fun of her for going. She calls it like woo-woo magic. And the funny thing is that that's actually a line that I stole it because someone said it to me. So I went to Reiki for a Reiki session, and the Reiki person said it to me years and years ago, and it stuck in my brain. So finally, I don't know how, I can't even remember how I decided, but it's a line in a story, so that's how it became the title. But it's not my line. Someone said it to me once.
It's a weird thing to say to someone, admittedly.
I think that's probably why I remember it so much.
Carrie said to me as she read your book, she said they're all short stories, and they really left her wanting in a lot of cases. Talk about that for a minute.
Just like wanting more, not wanting in the sense that I didn't find it enjoyable.
One of us knew what I meant.
Yeah.
So what makes the choice for that? I mean, why short? I always think of that, probably not really attributed to a Mark Twain quote about I wanted to write you a short letter, but I didn't have any time, so I had to write a long one. What made you do short letters?
Yeah, so I do write all kinds of things, but I do think of myself more than anything as a short story writer. I do read a lot of short stories, and I think, it's funny because I listened to one of your shows last night, and there was an author on there who wrote short stories, and she really got it. It's the showing someone a snapshot and putting them in a place, and it works really well for horror because it's like, instead of the slow build up, it's almost like the Beastie Boys beginning of a story. Like, you just throw them in, and it's just like kick it, throw them in, and then you leave them at the end. And what I like about it is that you're handing it over to the reader after that. So you're like, okay, this is where I'm ending, and the rest of it is up to you. So what I find is often readers come and tell me about what they thought happened after the story, and it's always completely different. People have different versions of what they think happened after, and I always tell them that they want me to tell them what the real ending is, and I always tell them that it's whatever they think it is. That I'm not. It's not up to me. They make their own ending. So that's one of the things that I like to do in short stories.
Keith says, some left me sleepless. Some of the ones in Dark Blood Comes from the Feet.
I get that reaction a lot.
Cody says, if you have books in arm's reach, they have to be some of your favorites. What are a few of the books on the shelf? If by shelf, you mean the antler table.
Yeah, I like the shelves over there. So, and then there's some over here. I'd like to say they're my favorites, but I'm just always got lots of books. There's some books up here. So there's always books at arm's length. But if I look, let me grab some from over here. So I can pick two up just off the bat. So this one is American Gods by Neil Gaiman. And they did a special editions with like these kind of retro covers, and that is one of my favorites. I think it's a fantastic novel. And then this one I have not read yet, but I highly recommend him. So this is Paul Tremblay's new book, and it came out a couple of days ago, and I really, as far as being sleepless, I highly recommend his novels. And the great thing about this is it's done in, if you can see, we've got one character telling the story, but then there's another character that like interrupts and writes in the margins. Telling the story.
Marginalia.
Yeah. So there's, thank you, Cody. There's two that are over there just randomly. But yeah, there's all kinds of things all over the place.
Almost like you're a librarian.
Yeah, you would think I'd get enough of books at work. But
you're muted,
they're
Chris.
literally all over the place.
Unless you're talking to Cody.
Because Cody says, I'm 70% of the way through American Gods. So
Oh,
of all the books to pull.
that's randomly quite great. Yeah, it's a fantastic book. It really is.
We talked about the fact that, GAIMAN's North Mythology book is pretty impressive too, and that clearly it had to have come from some of the research he did to do American Gods.
Yeah.
And he just thought, I'll finish and write the book. Do your projects ever have that kind of spillover potential where, you've written something and you go, I've got a little extra, I'm going to save it around for another something?
Oh, absolutely. In my instance, often characters and places will happen again. So right now, I'm writing a novel, and Felicity from the Black Shuck is in it. So the Black Shuck, the bar, is in the novel. Because I just sometimes with certain characters or settings, I just think I'm not quite done with them. I want to bring them back. And I kind of think of it as like Emma world. So my stories happen in this alternate world that I've created, and so in that case, they're all existing all at the same time, and I can kind of pull them out and go, oh yeah, we're going to look what you're doing now. So yeah, it definitely all kind of connects up in a weird way.
Are they all in the same alternate world? Like this is the same, like, how in Stephen King books or something, the same towns or the same areas come up. Like, is it the same for you? Are these all in the same universe?
Yes, but like not quite as concrete as Stephen King, because that's like clearly a town. Like I live, I'm in what they call the Stephen King triangle. So like I'm in between where all the next town is where he went to high school. So I'm in between where the imaginary towns are. But with mine, it's a bit more, there's Emma world, but there's also kind of like parallel universes. And then there's also like some things that happened in the past, but it's the same world. And it doesn't always fit reality wise, but I just make in my version, it works anyway. So they all
you make the rules.
Yeah.
Is there one you feel like you could expand into a novel? Would it be the Black Shuck or something? Or would you just tell a different story of Felicity's?
I feel like all of them could be potentially, if not a novel, then maybe a TV series or something, some longer thing. But what's funny is people tell me that all the time. So people come say to it, like even like my sister's like, that was Black Shuck with her. She was like, that could be a novel. And I'm like, yeah, that's great. But it's a short story right now. Like they could be, but I don't know whether they ever will be. I don't have much. It just happens how it happens, so we'll see. But I definitely not ruling any of that out, because it may happen.
Chris's dad likes your chair, your gamer chair.
Oh, thank you.
Like chair.
So my husband's a professional gamer, so I get like the ones that are like kind of slightly broken. So that's why I've got it.
Well, now we have to ask, what game does he professionally game?
He's officially retired now, but he used to play Smash Bros. So
who did he main on Smash Bros? That's important to know.
Oh, now he's telling me. I think it might have been, he switched over time, but I think it might have been Yoshi. No, who's the guy, the big guy from Link, red and black guy?
Ganon?
Yes. So he has a tendency. Yeah, he has a tendency to play characters that people think are not viable, and then surprise them because they think. Yeah,
that's what I was gonna say when you said Ganon. I was like, who plays Ganon?
Yeah, no one.
Right. Wow, but he retired, eh?
Yeah.
So,
hey, I know we didn't bring Emma on the show to talk about what her husband does.
I did.
That's the extent of what I know anyway.
Every male interviewer gets right. What's your husband do?
I do have an Emma-verse question though. I was asking Kerry this question, and I'm curious to know your answer. I'm a post-apocalyptic guy. Like if I had the time for fiction, not like I'm busy, but like were I to decide what I was going to read for fiction, I read a lot of nonfiction, it would be a post-apocalyptic kind of story. So I think what that makes me, or like how I think of in my head when I read those books is, I like to kind of think, how do they recreate a civilization of some sort after it's been smushed? And that's what I think of, in what I would probably want to write about. What makes one a horror author and what makes one a horror reader? And in your mind, what makes that their jam, and why do they need it?
There's a lot of theories, and I wouldn't like to say this is a definite theory. I because there's a post-apocalyptic short in that in my book, which is Sermon of New London, which was originally written for a podcast actually. But I think when it comes to like post-apocalyptic art, like people who write horror, I have this theory that people who like horror at heart are quite, because they're all lovely. That's the weird thing. You'll start meeting horror writers and you're like, he's lovely. You know, they're not who you think they're going to be. But my theory is I see a lot of people who like horror and write horror. They're quite anxious people. They're quite worried about things in the world. And people think that people who like horror are brave, and they are, but they're also worried. They're worried about things. They feel things that are happening in the world and are worried and anxious about it. And when you read a horror story, it's a controlled scare or a controlled like creep. So you know that ultimately, if it becomes too much, you can just put that book down. But what the real draw is that you can follow that horror or follow that scariness or creepiness or anxiety and know that you're in a controlled situation where it is going to end. Whereas some of the anxieties we're feeling right now about the world, we really don't know. We've got no control of them. We don't know whether they're going to end, but this is like almost like practice. This is like taking your fears and your anxiety and just keeping it in a contained space. And I wouldn't like to suggest that that's why everybody reads horror, but I often come across people that is definitely the case.
It does let a little steam out of the pot.
That's
true.
Yeah. And I think for me, a lot of it is there's another like slightly more positive side of it. Like when you think about the horror tropes like werewolves and monsters and ghosts and, you know, things like that, which I do in my writing. I do all kinds of horror. Like if you gave me an option, like you can live in the actual world. Like I'm one of the people who I want to believe, but I'm a skeptic, you know. But if you give me a world where, well, you could have this normal, boring world, or you could have a world with like werewolves or vampires or big black dogs that are going to protect you from bad men. Like, do you want to live in that world? And I'd be like, well, actually, yes.
Right.
So,
and then in 5 minutes, you're dead. And you're like,
Yeah.
I should have picked the other one.
Yeah. That's the only thing. Would I survive in such a world? Maybe not.
Or cats who eat you while you're dead, you know?
Yeah. Which
I
is fair
that's
enough.
one of your concerns.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you're dead.
I just assume we will eventually with my cat.
Cody wants to know what your writing process is. How do you get into writing mode?
Oof. Thank you. That's a good question, Cody. It depends what it is. So if I'm writing poetry, that usually happens on a morning, and I'm not a morning person. So I'm like it's like a liminal kind of time when I'm half asleep. For writing short stories and novels and other scripts, things like that, I really do have to Jedi mind trick myself that I'm not doing anything too important, because if I start to believe my own hype and like, oh, I'm going to write the best novel of all time, then I can't write. So I do a lot of walking around. I do a lot of picking stuff up and putting it back down again. And I'll just sit in what I call noodling. So I'll just like, well, I'm just noodling. I'll write a sentence. Well, I'll just walk over here. I'll come back. And so that way I can trick myself into producing stuff without over-facing myself with the, like, oh God, you're writing a novel? Like, that's a lot of words. Like, what, you know, so it's a lot of, it's not the most efficient way of doing things, but it is the way that I've found the best. And I'm not a person who writes every day. If you give me tell me I've got to do something every day, I'm going to go, no, actually, no. I'm not.
I don't know anybody contrary like that.
Yeah, no.
Elizabeth says, get a dopamine shot from the cortisol boost from reading horror. It does kind of give you a thrill.
Yeah,
reading horror. And Annette says, fascinating to listen to the description of this genre and controlled tension in alternate worlds. Mm-hmm. It does. If it feels too close to home, though, those are the most unsettling ones. Like I could read the one about St. Scholastica's school or home for the children of the sea. That one was like, felt like it was totally apart from anything in my experience. Yeah. And yet, what's horrifying about all these stories is human nature. That's the scariest thing about all these to me. Yeah.
I mean, as we said earlier, if ever I've got a theme that I come back to, that is it. You know, The monsters are usually the good guys in my stories.
That's interesting to think about too. When I was my sort of journey in reading horror, of course, I think it was like a lot of people, Stephen King, and you go, oh, that's pretty neat. And then the early King, of course, is like, insane. And then somewhere along the line, someone slips you like a Dean Koontz, and you go, oh, that's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And then Clive Barker shows up.
Yes.
And you go, okay. And then that seems to be like a parsing or like a sorting hat for some.
Yeah.
And I feel like almost the same way, once you hit Clive Barker, that's when you figure out there's this other guy, Lovecraft.
Yeah.
Do you find that the journeys are a little different now that we have a whole Gen Z, none of that ever happened kind of thing? Like, they're not starting at Salem's Lot. Where do they start?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't think we'll know yet until later. And we see what they're influenced by. Like there's a lot of authors that are influenced by H.P. Lovecraft, but because I come from a different tradition, because my formative texts that I was reading were different, that mine was stuff like Alfred Hitchcock and Shirley Jackson and Daphne du Maurier and things like that, Roald Dahl's adults. That so for me, my trajectory was and Stephen King obviously, but my trajectory was kind of slightly different. And so you've got these different authors coming up of like my generation and the next two who are coming from different places anyway.
Contrast those for a second. Mix you just said of your influences, because I was right with you until you said Roald Dahl, and I went, oh, well, he's so bizarre.
Yeah.
Hitchcock is so like sort of I don't know the word to say, but like he's like a magician. I'm gonna do this thing, and then you're gonna see it. But I told you about it, but you didn't catch it. And then Shirley Jackson, I don't know. I would say she's just such a great narrator of sorts.
Yeah.
Can you make that soup for us for a second?
You have to read Dark Blood Comes with the Feet.
Yeah, I was gonna say like that.
My stupid writing broken. Okay.
But yes, so Roald Dahl, his adult short stories are very different from his kids stuff. So it's still quite bizarre things. And he did this. There was a TV show when I was a kid called Tales of the Unexpected, and that was based on Roald Dahl short stories for adults. And they're actually very. If you read my book, you can tell the influences, but they're a bit more Hitchcockian. They've got more weird stuff than Hitchcock, but it's often they've all got a reveal at the end where what you thought was happening is not happening. It's something else entirely that you didn't think of. So there is some connection there.
There's definitely one that I was like, ew, no. We have a question here in the comments. So if you had to recommend 5 horror novels besides your own, what would you recommend? Michael Doherty would like to know.
So I'm going to just do the top of my head. Wait a minute. Going to look around the shelves. 5. So one would be We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. I reread that all the time. It's a fantastic story. I wish I'd read it earlier. You know, when you read books where you think I would have become myself quicker had I read that book earlier. So We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. I would also recommend House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski. That's an amazing book. It's a lot of work to get through, but it's amazing. It's the only book I've ever read that makes you feel like agoraphobic but claustrophobic at the same time. You're like bouncing in and out. It's very strange. I'm going to start struggling now. Let's see. I would say, one of the Stephen Kings. So my personal, the first one I ever read was Salem's Lot. So I'm going to throw that in, Salem's Lot, just for a sense of place of a small town and things going strange. I'm going to, how many am I up to?
3.
And a more recent one that came out, an author I absolutely recommend is My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones.
Yes, such a good one.
Which is just amazing. He's like a super literary writer, but he's totally riffing on slasher movies and slashers. And there's a lot of like A lot of people are murdered, let's put it that way. But it makes you care about the characters. So the main character, you're really pulling for her and you want her to help. And then randomly,
which hurts more.
Yeah, it really does hurt more in that thing. There's all these people being murdered and you're like, not really.
No.
But then when something happens to her, you're really. And then I'm going to, because I mentioned Paul Tremblay's Head Full of Ghosts, which is about a family that their daughter may or may not be possessed, or she may be mentally ill, and they bring in a TV, they start like a TV show, you know, like one of these like reality shows about whether, you know, about her exorcism. And that was the book that when I started writing horror again after a long time, I read that and it made me remember why I liked horror in the first place.
Nikki wants to know how long it takes to write a book. It seems like an impossible task. So
I'm in year 3 of writing a novel, and it feels like an impossible task for me too. So the thing is with Dark Blood comes from, I think it depends. Like, I know people who take 10 years to write a book. I also know people that can write a book in 6 weeks. And there's no, it's just the way people work. There's no, like, if you take 10 years or you take 6 weeks, quite often you won't be able to, one's not better than the other. It just depends on the person and how they work. With Dark Blood Comes From the Feet, that did take a long time because I didn't realize that I was writing a book. The short stories in there span a kind of 10-year span. So I'd been writing short stories for 10 years. And then there was actually a publisher put out a call for short story collections, and it was a 50,000 word limit. And I thought, wow, maybe I've got enough. And then I found I did. So yeah, it took a long time, but I wasn't really. It always does. To every writer, I can tell you, most people, it feels like an impossible task every time. And you're like, question why you're doing it and what you're doing with your life. But it's worth it when you get to the end.
How are you working it in with working as a librarian?
I'm a very tired person. I basically work at the library and I come home and I write and then I sleep and that's about it. So yeah, it's a lot.
But I did see advice that you gave on Twitter that also said to remember to just kind of sit down and, tease yourself or, coax yourself into writing just a couple sentences, just add some and like trick yourself. And I think that's a useful method.
Yeah, because there's nothing more overwhelming than a blank page. And what the problem I find is it's not once I get started and get a couple of lines down, I can kind of keep going, but it's the sitting down in the first place. There's always like things you could be doing that are not writing actually. And so if you just open the document and then just keep, thinking, I'll just, a sentence here and there, you can trick yourself into doing more.
Trick yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because different people actually write it different ways too. So some people will be able to get one out in 6 weeks, but the next one will take 10 years. Some people.
Yeah, that's absolutely. Yeah.
You didn't realize I'm talking about him. But as many books as you have, they're all different.
Yeah.
Certainly caught a lot of people's attention. One last Cody comment. I always love the podcast from Malcolm Gladwell where he dives in about Cohen versus Dylan. Dylan wrote Blowing in the Wind in like 30 minutes. Cohen took 5 years to write Hallelujah.
Yeah.
Which is funny because most of the words are hallelujah.
If you look at, I think it's Dolly Parton, didn't she write like Jolene and I Will Always Love You in one afternoon, things like that. And like we can't all do that kind of thing, but it's true that some people are very, very quick. And usually the people who write quick have been thinking about it for a long time and then it all kinds of comes out. And then
consciously or subconsciously, right? Like sometimes it just bubbles to the surface.
That's absolutely true, yeah.
Michael says, Kerry. Michael says, I love the concept of tricking yourself to write more. Definitely a struggle getting that done. It feels like a chore.
Yeah.
I'm going to guess your answer is no. Do you ever do voice to text? I find I have to record my ideas and then edit to overcome the blank page anxiety.
I don't, but the reason I don't is because obviously, you may have noticed I've got an accent. So if I start doing text, whenever I try to talk to like text to voice to text, things like that. It's not going to look like what I mean. If you ever hear me, and also because I've been in the States for 10 years, so I've got like a kind of mixture of American and also Yorkshire. So if I talk to, you know what, when you talk into a computer on the phone, whether it's a British one or an American one, none of them know what I'm saying. So I end up screaming like, I need a person. Send me a person. So yeah, I think that's a great idea, but personally it wouldn't work for me because I can't get it to, work.
It's one of my favorite tropes too, is Siri can't understand Scottish people at all. They're forever just in front of a machine that just has no idea what they're saying.
It makes for great video though, like great YouTube videos.
Yeah. Oh, I was just Googling one up to like load it. I said, forget it. We don't have time.
I was using the Babbel language app the other night, and like my earbuds got twisted around or something, and so it couldn't understand me. I was like, what the hell? My pronunciation was perfect like 2 seconds ago. And then I realized I can't hear me.
Just twisty. All right, so we're heading towards the end of the show. So we've come to the part where we get to pick a person of the day.
Oh, and here's our person of the day. Kaboom!
Well, there's no real question today because he was all over it. I'm gonna give it to Cody. Although, I'm also really thrilled that Nikki showed up. I hadn't seen Nikki on the channel. Maybe she's an Emma pal. But I'm glad she came by. So with the voice transcript, I think you just need to train the tool. I have quite a thick one. So what kind of accent do you have, Nikki? I wouldn't be able to guess. But
Cody can actually make you buy him an apple now, though.
Chloe from Scotland points out that the struggle is real.
Cody, make him buy you an apple.
Yeah, that's true. He's going to buy an apple. Nikki's one of the best. All right, so we've come to that end of the show. One other thing I wanted to ask you that we've asked every single guest who's been on here, everybody from Sir Mix-a-Lot to Mistress Harley, the financial dominatrix. We asked the question, what goes in your backpack? Now, this could be something physical, like an avocado. It could be something metaphorical, like hope for the future. Kerry, what's an idea of something physical someone could put in a backpack?
Ooh, extra set of teeth. DJ Cumberbund.
Right. I mean, a vampire with, So how about something metaphorical, Kerry? What would you add?
Kindness. Ariel Helvetica put kindness in the backpack.
Burlesque dancer, no less. Thanks, Nikki. Emma J. Gibbon, what would you add to the backpack?
So as a horror writer, I'm going to go the opposite way. I'm going to put in a metaphorical thing, and I'm going to put in spite.
Spikes?
Spite. S-P-I-T-E.
Spite.
Spite will get you.
Nobody values spite more than Chris Brogan.
I mean, that would probably help, right? Especially with vampires.
Let me tell you about spite, Emma. Chris will like screen cap something just to show you he's right. Yeah. And
see,
you're like, I believe you.
I think it can take you a long way. It's surprising what you can get accomplished by spite. If someone tells me I can't do anything, well, so I think it's a great motivator. I think it's something you can use in your life. So that would be what I would put in the backpack.
Just remember to clear out those screenshots.
No, I'm keeping them in case I need them again. To me, like the best thing ever on a tombstone would be like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
But
we'll put all your screenshots. That's what we'll do. We'll get a compilation of all of them. You'll be like, I was right.
Yeah.
Put it in quotes.
That'll be at the wake. Apropos of such things and horror writers, my grandmother used to take me around to graveyards, partly to handle the relatives and tidy up their graves and all that stuff. But we'd make a game out of it, and we'd go around and we'd look for just one thing that we thought was like kind of creepy, but also fun to do. And one of the things we'd look for on the gravestone